Okay, hi. I'm not gonna waste time, okay? So before, in 17.1, okay? Before the mid 19th century, so before the mid 19th century, yeah, only a small number of settlers had moved, west, and the land beyond the Mississippi River was mostly just unexplored by the United States. And like most Americans, when they thought about the region, assumed it was just like really dry, empty, and like basically like a wasteland, suitable only for Native American communities, which is kind of messed up. And early explorers supported this idea. Um, like for example, Major Stephen Harriman Long, um, he led an expedition through Missouri and into the Yellowstone area between 1819 through 1820. He repeatedly described the Great Plains as dry, useless land, and what he called a great American desert. But starting in the 1400s, Americans began to like change their view of the West. Like their view of the West became more of a economic opportunity place and ideological like encouragement, including like the belief in expansion and manifest destiny and stuff. It made people more interested in moving westward because now it's just not like some stupid desert that you know. And the federal government also offered reasons that made it easier, like incentives that made it easier for Americans to try to take over these lands from their Native American and Hispanic owners. So settlers needed money before they could go, and government help alone was not enough. So very poor Americans still could not afford the journey, and moving an entire family west required like significant resources, and it came with a lot of risks, and it also didn't guarantee success. The Panic of um, 1837 pushed a lot of Americans to reconsider the promises of urban life and look to more of the potential of like commercial farming in the West instead of just like we're all city folk. But the same economic crisis also left many people without the financial ability to actually migrate. So for most Americans, the famous advice to like go west, young man, is that's what they say, right? Go west, young man. They couldn't do that because they just have no money because of the Panic of 1837. Like that's so sad. And although economic opportunity was a big reason for westward expansion, ideological beliefs also played a very big role. Like a lot of Americans believed that the land and the indigenous people living on it were destined to come under the civilizing influence of European American settlers and their advanced technology, especially like the railroad and the telegraph. Like it's really weird. Like they thought like indigenous people were like made to basically be whitewashed. Yeah, like the railroad, the telegraph, they got advanced technology, I guess. So whether most Americans actually believe this or just use it to justify taking over Western lands is it's like debated still. I have no idea. It's probably both. But what is clear is, the physical, cultural conflicts that were created by westward migration left not good results. Not good. Anyways, manifest destiny. Let's talk about that. So manifest destiny grew out of the long tradition of U.S. territorial expansion, which existed since the nation was even founded. So, like, we know this is what we like to do. We just like to go everywhere. Like, we just like to expand our territory. And the phrase itself, manifest destiny, was like basically suggesting that expansion was encouraged by God. It was created in 1845 by a magazine editor, John O'Sullivan. And in the United States Magazine and Democratic Review, he wrote that it was our manifest destiny to overspread the continent allotted by Providence for the free development of our multiplying millions. I literally don't know what that means. O'Sullivan used this phrase to basically support American expansion into the newly acquired Texas. I don't know how to draw Texas. That's good enough. That's actually really bad. Yeah, but the idea quickly spread and later justified westward settlement throughout the entire 19th century. Land developers, railroad owners, and a bunch of other investors took advantage of this belief of manifest destiny. That's like, it's your God-given right. Don't know what that means. They took advantage of this belief to promote Western settlement for their own profit. They just wanted to make money. I mean, I guess. The federal government soon also joined in, especially after the Civil War, when leaders wanted to strengthen and develop the West and feared the possible expansion of slavery further into Western territories. The idea behind manifest destiny was really straightforward. I mean, Americans were meant to, or almost like chosen by God to spread democratic institutions across the continent. And as they moved west, they would bring their culture, customs, and Protestant beliefs and showed indigenous people new ways to develop the land. And I know even though O'Sullivan invented the phrase, the idea had existed way before that. I mean, okay, throughout the entire 1800s, politicians and writers argued that the United States was meant to rule the continent, like all of it. And O'Sullivan's words became very popular and matched the federal government's growing commitment to expansion. I mean, they want more power, they want bigger country. I get it. Okay. So Manifest Destiny convinced a lot of Americans that they had the right and the duty to control any group they encountered while expanding west, like Native Americans, Mexicans, Hispanics, like literally everyone. And it also made them feel justified in using really questionable or like unfair methods. I mean, even though Americans imagined the West as an empty frontier waiting to be settled, that's not true. I mean, there's Hispanic communities in the Southwest, like Native American tribes across the West, and settlers from Asia and Western Europe that already lived in the region. American expansion would involve a lot of like difficult interactions between them. I mean, not just moving into open land, but I mean, still partly because of O'Sullivan, a lot of large numbers of Americans and newly arrived immigrants began heading west in like these wagon trails. Like, I don't know what they look like. So they traveled along major trails such as the Oregon Trail, the Santa Fe Trail, and the California Trail. And the Oregon Trail became the most famous. It stretched 2,000 miles and was barely usable on foot in the early 1800s, but by the 1840s, wagon trails were a lot more common. From 1845 to 1870, the peak years of migration, more than I'm lying. So 1845 to 1870, just peak migration. So yeah, more than 400,000 settlers traveled west from Missouri using this route, the Oregon route. And although movies often emphasize conflict with Native Americans, tribes usually just acted as guides or traded with the travelers. Like, I don't know. It kind of is. It is that deep, but it's not really that deep at the same time. You know? Okay. The federal government's assistance in westward expansion. Let's see. In 1862, during the Civil War, Congress passed the Homestead Act and the Pacific Railway Act to encourage westward settlement and strengthen the Union's free soil vision. Lincoln feared that if the Union lost early in the war, slavery might expand into the West, and these two laws were meant to promote a West made up of small, independent, free farmers rather than slaveholders. And the Homestead Act in 1862 gave 160 acres of public land to any head or of household or adult over 21. This included unmarried women, which was very significant. Great. And only required settlers to improve the land within 5 years, and standards were very minimal. I mean, you could just build a small structure, clear like a few acres, and like keep animals in your thing. And so the result of this was that 270 million acres of federal land were transferred to private citizens. And this encouraged crazy migration and settlement of the western frontier, like, truly. And the Pacific Railway Act. So this authorized a transcontinental road built by Union Pacific, building west from Omaha, and Central Pacific, building east from Sacramento. And this gave rail companies ownership of land 200 feet on each side of the track, also additional land grants, and payment through federal loans scaled by the difficulty of terrain. I mean, if it's all rocky, like, I mean, what can you really do? They're just going to give you money, I guess. That's all they can do. So yeah, these acts advanced Lincoln's goal of expanding the free labor west, you know, and economically it fueled like commercial agriculture, mining, and cattle industries, and socially they encouraged mass migration, leading to new towns, diversity, and also displacement of indigenous people. I mean, also like a lot of women now have land, so that's good. And yeah, so they also lay the foundation for America's national market economy. So, yay. Okay. The government's role in Western migration. Let's talk about that. And even beyond acts like or laws like the Homestead Act and the Pacific Railway Act, the federal government actively assisted settlement by building forts across the West. So, like, Western forts. Forts. So this was supposed to protect settlers and support safe migration. This was also supposed to facilitate, like, trade with American Indian tribes, like, example, Fort Laramie and Fort Apache. And it was supposed to act as trading posts for miners and fur trappers, like Colorado and Wyoming. And it was supposed to provide relief for farmers facing drought and hardship like Kansas, Nebraska, Dakota, South Dakota, North Dakota, whatever. And also protect Pacific coastline after the Mexican-American War and during the Civil War. And later served U.S. Navy bases and helped expand Pacific trade. So forts help settlers survive the journey west. Like, you just, like, stay here, and then I go here, right? And supported economic development, trade, mining, agriculture, and the U.S. military, political control over Western territories. It helped enable and enforce westward expansion, usually at the expense of Native people, but we're, we know it's sad. So the early settlers of the 1840s through 1850s mostly were moderately prosperous white native-born farming families. Not native as in, like, Native American, native as in, like, literally born in America. Like, kind of mid-wealthy white people. They needed... and they farmed. They needed money to afford travel, wagons, animals, land, and tools, and then months without income before harvesting, and they usually followed the routes like the Oregon Trail. And so those were the early settlers. And so later settlers, after the Homestead Act and Railroad, Pacific Railroad law, I don't know what that was called again, I forgot. Of the 1870s, like late settlers in the 1870s. So by this time, migration became possible for Americans with, like, fewer resources. So the Homestead Act and cheap, fast railroad travel opened the West to a lot more people. I mean, let's look at the numbers. By 1870, yes, about 400,000 settlers moved west. We know this, and they were mostly men. But families also came, despite it kind of being hard to. Also, kind of a lot of immigrant migration to the West. Like, there's a large number of Europeans that moved to the West after 1862, specifically, like, Germans, Scandinavians, like, as in Norwegian, Swedes, Danish people, Danes, Irish, and Chinese people, but mainly to California for the gold rush, and also, Jesus Christ, if you, like, those working conditions, insane. So they matter also because they formed a lot of tight-knit ethnic communities in the Midwest, like in Minnesota and Wisconsin, over a third were foreign born by 1900. And in North Dakota, they had a 45% immigrant population by 1900. That's wild. North Dakota, 45%. And yeah, so examples like the population growth of Scandinavians was from 18,000 to 1.1 million from 1850 to 1900. And Germans, 584,000 to 2.7 million. Irish, 961,000 to 1.6 million. And for the Chinese, 200,000 arrived in California from 1876 to 1890. And yeah, so yay. And Let's talk about the exodusters. Exodusters. I don't know. Exodusters. And these were African Americans who migrated west after the Civil War, and their name references the Bible Exodus, symbolizing their escape from, the Southerners, like, because they were racist, discriminated against them, and they were very violent, like the KKK and Redeemer governments. And they went to mainly Kansas, and they went to mainly Kansas, but they came from Kentucky, Tennessee, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Texas. 25,000 and more exodusters arrived in Kansas from 1879 to 1880. And by 1890, 500,000 plus Black Americans lived west of the Mississippi River. And they mostly became farmers. Around 12,000 worked as cowboys on Texas cattle drives. Some became buffalo soldiers, which is all Black cavalry and infantry units, and many were former Union soldiers, and they were meant to protect settlers, fight in Indian wars, and build infrastructure like roads, forts, and telegraph lines. And their name allegedly comes from native tribes comparing their hair to buffalo fur. I don't know. And Hispanics in the West. Before U.S. expansion, hundreds of thousands of Hispanics, usually Mexicans, lived in the Southwest, like California, New Mexico, Arizona, Texas, Nevada, Colorado, Utah. And there were a lot of communities with different cultures and land systems, ranchos, and traditions. And after the Mexican-American War of 1846 to 1848, the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo of 1848 transferred the land to the U.S., and Mexicans living there became Hispanic American citizens with certain rights. And those who stayed could retain Mexican citizenship while living in the U.S., become full U.S. citizens with constitutional rights, and also return to Mexico. Obviously. They were promised protection of property rights, freedom of language, freedom of religion, and protection of culture. And although this is the case, this is what they said, but what actually happened mostly was within one generation, their land was usually stolen or illegally seized. Courts offered very little protection for them, and Hispanic culture faced discrimination, segregation, and political exclusion. And despite legal promises, Hispanic Americans usually experience a lot of loss of land, racial hostility, and just they got their rights taken away. So, yeah. The West was not an empty frontier that had just nothing. It was shaped by Black, Hispanic, immigrant, and white settlers. And African Americans saw the West as a place of freedom and opportunity, even though they still faced discrimination. But, yeah. And Hispanic communities suffered broken treaty promises and became targets of Americanization. And then the West, just a bunch of cultures, racial conflicts, transition. Not just expansion, so. Yep, that's it for 17.1. Okay, thanks for watching. This is mostly for me, but bye.